All right, we are inside the command center with Louie T from Louie T Network. Thanks for hopping back on, buddy. Always good to have you on. How are you?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me on, Big Dog. Always a pleasure chopping it up with you.
Ain't no doubt. Let's see. How long are you? You've been in the game for a minute. How long you been at this thing now?
So, literally, August 1st made 11 years. I got a notification from YouTube, but pretty much saying, hey, man, happy anniversary. So, been in the game over a decade. Time flies when you're having fun.
What's the biggest changes you think you've seen since you started? A decade ago. A lot has changed in those 10 years. I
Yeah,
got to
oh, yeah.
imagine.
Oh, obviously, so much has changed. But the biggest change, obviously, for me is just the amount of people, the sheer volume of people doing this now. When I first started, there weren't very many people doing what it is that I do. And so it was harder to um it was harder to wrangle in everyone. I think it's a lot easier now because if you watch one video and then it suggests, hey, you should watch this channel now. If you watch this, you might like this.
Right.
It wasn't as easy back then because it wasn't as many channels to bounce off of, but it was also easier from the standpoint of getting people to pay attention to what you were doing because there wasn't as many options, right? So if you
Right.
wanted extra content from ESPN or Fox Sports, you had to, watch this or that channel. Now you watch anything and you can be so specific to just your team because it's so concentrated now with so many content creators, which is also a good thing. I like to see people branching out, coming out of their comfort zone and, getting behind the mic and the camera too.
What do you think is the biggest reason you've lasted 10 years? What's the key to longevity in a game that is not, you know, yes, it is easy to start a YouTube channel. It
Yep.
is easy to start a podcast.
Mm.
It's not easy to make it 5 episodes. It damn sure isn't easy to make it 2 years.
Mhm.
I don't know how you've done it for 10 years. Give us some advice
Mm.
on making it this long in the game.
My biggest piece of advice is don't get discouraged. It's so easy so many people have come to me and hit me up, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel. You got any advice? And the first thing that I tell them is without even really giving them a lot of information, because I've done it so many times where I've poured in so much information to people and they do one or two videos and they get discouraged and they quit. And I tell you, don't get discouraged because when you first start out, you're not going to just have, thousands of people watching your show, right? Your video. You might start out and there may be 15 people that watch for the first 6 months, it can become frustrating because you feel like, why am I doing this? But if you can continue to push past that, continue to put out quality content, and that's the key is putting out quality content, as long as you continue to grind and you put that content out, they will come. Eventually they'll find you, but it's getting past that initial frustration of feeling like you're doing it in vain.
Are you doing it wrong if you're trying to be successful in more than one platform? Like, do you worry specifically about YouTube, or is it important to also be putting in the Apple side, the Spotify side? Can you do all of them successfully, or do you think it's more important to focus on one?
Oh, you could definitely do them simultaneously. The biggest key to me is, and this is where I struggle, and I can't wait till I get to the point where I can pay someone to do it for me because social media is huge, and being out in the public eye, that's not my thing. I'm more reserved. I kind of not, I'm not a big social media person. So um, social media is such a big part of what we do. It's the really, to me, the vehicle that drives so much of your success is how often you're able to post and bring attention to what it is you're doing. I can do so much better job of that in itself. But at the end of the day, if you're putting out the content on YouTube and you're getting it up to all of these different platforms, Spotify and Apple and all that stuff, again, you can do all of that at the same time, because people listen from different places. So your job isn't to worry about where they're listening, it's just to make sure that they have that capability to listen wherever they want to listen.
Do the shows need to be different? Is the show that you put for the viewer radically different than what needs to be done for the listener?
Yeah. So, it just depends on what the product is. For me personally, that's where the editing comes into play, because the product that you put out for the viewer is more engaging to those who are watching. And then when you do it for the listener, they can't see you. If you're making a mannerism or you're showing something on a screen, they can't see that. So it's your job to go back in, edit those things out, and make it more palatable for the listener. And also, like for me, with some of these apps that I use and the software, the background music and things of that nature aren't available on the live stream, but when I go back and edit, I put those things in. So again, it's just another thing that is individualized for the listener.
You were mentioning having extra capital laying around. I thought that's what you were going to say is for the editor, because having somebody that can cut up all those clips and get out the background noise and get you to the perfect levels, that's the key right there. I remember I was talking with Doc Walker one time, and he dropped. I did something wrong, and the whole thing cut off. And he goes later. He says, "You know why that happened, don't you?" And I said, "No, why, Doc?" And he says, "Well, because you don't have a producer." I said, "Yes, that's true. I do not, and
Yeah.
that would be nice to have one."
Yeah. You know what though? And so that's part of my journey, right? Like no one taught me how to do any of this stuff.
Right.
So that's the beauty, if you will, of doing it for as long as I have, is I learned all of this stuff over time. So editing things isn't a problem for me. I actually enjoy editing. I don't enjoy the time that it takes, which is why I don't do a lot of editing now. Like
Yeah.
literally, I shoot a video, it goes up to YouTube. I don't touch it at all, right? So so there's pre-production and then there's post-production. So there's pre-editing and there's post-editing. Everything that I do is pre-editing. So when I'm done, right?
Yeah.
So the whole, splicing, cutting, and all of that stuff, when I do have to do that, it's not a big deal. So that stuff doesn't bother me because I'm gotten so good at it now that it's not even a big deal. It's the social media aspect for me that is a killer.
Football's back. Let's
Yes.
talk about it.
Yes.
New ownership.
Mhm.
Tell me what it feels like after all this time. Is it a sigh of relief? No, I have to say, Louie, I thought that when Dan was gone, I'd do a like dance in the street.
Mhm.
I didn't ever really get that. I didn't get that feeling when Dan left, but I got the dance in the street feeling when Harris was announced the new owner.
Yeah.
Where have you been the last couple of months as we've kind of switched gears here with the organization?
I think that is such a great take, Doug, because I know it's kind of morbid, but I liken it to someone with a terminal illness, right? There's really no way to prepare yourself for death. You can tell yourself, hey, I know such and such has this illness and she's only been given, or he's only been given, such a certain amount of time to live. But it's still going to hit you. It's still going to impact you once that person finally does pass. And with Dan, we knew he was going to be gone. And so we were excited, and the excitement was building. And I too thought I was going to be dancing in the streets when it was official. And while I was excited, I wasn't sure how I was going to react to it being official, because the process had kind of drug itself out for so long. I didn't know how I was going to react. And I found myself being excited for a very long time. Like after it was official, I was still excited. I was still celebrating. And I think what made it even more special was seeing who was taking over and feeling that energy and feeling that this guy's going to come in here and he's going to help turn this thing around. Had the next ownership group come in and you weren't really feeling those vibes, maybe it's not as exciting. But seeing Josh Harris, Magic Johnson, Mitchell Rales, and all of those guys, and listening to them talk about the visions that they have for this organization, and Magic's like, I don't deal with losers and things of that. And there's proof in that. You can see everything that Magic Johnson touches turns to gold, and they win. And you're listening to Josh Harris talk about his fond memories of being a fan growing up. And I was a little apprehensive about that initially before listening to him talk. because Daniel Snyder was a fan of this
Been
team.
there,
He
done
grew
that,
up,
right? Yeah.
right. So I was
Right.
like, I don't know if I want the next owner to be a fan of this team because of what happened. I told you we have PTSD, right? We've suffered so much as a fan base, and I talk about it all the time. This fan base is fractured. There's people all over the place. Like, I was so worried about when Josh Harris took over, the amount of fans that were going to berate him with things that were non-football, the stadium, the name, you know what I mean? The uniforms, like so many people wanted so many things done right now. And I'm like, hey, just let this man come in here, settle in, you know, and assess the situation. He doesn't even know if I'm going to keep this entire staff that's here. He's got so much that he's got on his plate right away. But we've been starving for so long, right? Over 2 decades, we've been starving for so long that, you know, everything is going to be kind of thrown onto his plate and he's going to be bombarded, but he's handled it well. He's taken everything in stride, done a nice job of kind of deflecting the conversation about the name, because there's really nothing you can do about it right now at this very moment. Football is right on the horizon. And he said, I want to focus on, you know, the community, fan engagement, and football, helping this team win right now, helping improve the product on the field. And that's what he's doing. And I think he's doing a really good job to this point.
And the fans have reacted, and the players have noticed it. I mean, all the interviews are basically that way, right? When they ask about the change in ownership, it's the fans are back.
Yep.
And the fans have promised for a long time,
Yep.
if given change,
that's right,
they'd come back. And to their credit, to our credit, they have. And I'm glad about that. Let's talk about a couple things that Harris can do right away when he gets in. I'm with you. The stadium's not till 2031. They're not changing the name anytime soon. It would seem like if they did, it would be with a stadium rollout. But you're hoping at that point the team's winning football games, and if they're winning football games by 2031, then there's no reason to move on from the name. So, like, that's the fastest 30 seconds I like to spend on the name, because I think that's kind of what it deserves.
Yeah.
But there are some things that he can do right away. He can upgrade the facilities. We know he's done things to the practice center. He can bring in, they've already started bringing in more analytics guys. So what are some of the things that and you think of right off the top that Harris can do kind of immediately to make impacts on the team?
And I think you've touched on a lot of that stuff. The first thing was fan engagement, right? And they've just the little things that he's done, as you mentioned, the practice facility, putting bleachers out there just so the fans can have somewhere to sit, right? Like that, it's such a small gesture, but it means so much to a fan base that hasn't been catered to for so long. We've been left unattended for over 2 decades. And just a small gesture like that means so much to us. So it's little things like that. You know what I mean? You're going to see little improvements. He talked about this in his introductory presser about how, you know, FedEx Field is your home. And when you invite guests to your home, you want them to be comfortable.
I loved that.
You know, right. Exactly. You know, our stadium is a dump. And we've talked about this over the years. It's a dump, but it's our dump. You know what I mean? So make people respect our dump. He's trying to make it so that it's not a dump for the final, whatever many years that we have to be there. He's like, we're going to fix all of these monitors. We're going to put other things in there that make the fan experience better. They've put up rails that make it easier for you to travel. And, you know, I mean, Jalen Hurts had fans fall on him 2 years ago at FedEx Field. Like, that's dangerous, right? So, you know, it's the little things he can do, the fan engagement, you know, making fans feel more part of this organization, bringing them back into the fold. I think the thing that we care about most, or at least I can't speak for everyone, I can speak for myself, is the product on the field. And that's right. What I want to see is us win. You know, a lot of that other stuff to me is background noise, and people get kind of caught up in all of the nostalgia of the name and all of that stuff. Look, at the end of the day, it is what it is. I want to win. And he seems like he wants to win as well. I've listened to people who have been covering the Philadelphia 76ers, and they said, look, Josh Harris is giving that organization all the resources it's needed to win and win big. And he continues to try to put them in the best positions to win. My dad is a Philadelphia 76ers fan. I can attest to the fact that he's gone in there and given them every opportunity to win, and they just haven't done it. So I like some of the things that he's done. in other areas and in other avenues. And I'm hoping that this is a much bigger animal now. This isn't the NHL. This isn't the NBA. This is the
That's right.
NFL. Okay, this
That's
is
right.
huge, right? So I want to see how he's going to adjust and adapt to all of the different changes in this league from the ones that he's owned previously. But at the end of the day, coming in this first year and trying to surveying the scene, seeing what Ron and company are able to do is going to be his first order of business. If they can't get it done, he's going to probably clean house and bring in a whole new staff. And it's going to start at the top with a brand new GM who will probably then handpick the coach, who will then pick his staff, and then we'll go from there. And then you'll see a lot of roster turnover and things of that nature. So I'm hoping that Ron can get it done this year so that we don't have as much change, because so many people want change. They can't stand Ron. They want him gone. They want this, that, and I understand Ron hasn't won here. I understand the fans that want someone else to come in here, but understand with Ron gone means more change. And if you are rooting for Sam Howell like I am, change isn't good. He's had 2 coordinators in 2 years. You get rid of Ron, he's going to have a 3rd coordinator more likely than not, unless EB is here next year. A 3rd coordinator in 3 years. That is a death sentence to a young quarterback, continuing to change things and never having him get comfortable. So I myself would like to see Ron be successful this year and allow some continuity to remain. There's been so much change with this organization, but I think the thing that Josh Harris can do right now is what he's been doing: engage the fans, continue to work behind the scenes on the things that are important. The stadium is important, right? And that's going to happen over time. But like you said, that's off in the distance. But at some point, you have to break ground on that. You have to pick a location. You have to break ground and start building, right? So you're working behind the scenes to try to maybe get that thing back in downtown DC at the RFK site where it belongs. If you can't, you go somewhere else. You figure it out. You break ground on that. So you're working on that and behind the scenes. You're working. I think they're going to change the name. But again, that's down the road, right?
You think they will?
I think they're going to change the name. I do. I don't want them to. Not because I like Commanders, but I'm just tired of change. The last name change process was exhaustive as a fan. I just don't want to go through that again. We changed names 3 times in 2 years. I don't really want to go through that process again if I don't have to. But I understand if they want to change the name, that go right ahead. I'm not going to push back. Okay, I don't have any energy for that, but I would prefer them not to, if it were up to me. So I think his biggest thing is, hey, let's just try to make this product on the field the best. Because if you really, truly want the fans to come back and stay, winning is what's going to bring them back ultimately,
That's right.
So that's right. I think that's what he has to focus in on.
You brought up Ron Rivera. It's very interesting. I've been thinking about this all off season, and so I'll be curious your take on this. I went and looked at the website. It used to be that Ron was there on the VP of head of football ops. He's not there anymore. His just only title now is head coach. He said he's excited to just be head coach, which I think is interesting because he's the one that wanted all the power when he got here. I didn't like it at the time. I actually think he did a pretty good job. If he actually gets credit for being the president of football ops in the last couple of drafts and all those things and bringing in coaches, then I think he's actually done kind of a good job, maybe a better job with that than he's done at being the head coach. I am curious now, though, to see how he does at head coaching when all he's got to do is focus on head coaching. No ownership stuff, no cancer treatments, no name change, no none of it. Where are you with Ron, and what do they have to do this year for Ron to be back next year?
So you were the one that actually brought that to the consciousness of most of the fans in the fan base. Like I wasn't aware until I saw your tweet about that. So it was interesting because Ron said he felt more like a manager these first 3 years of his tenure here, where he wasn't actually a football coach, because he was always putting out fires. So I said this when Ron first took the job. I said he has no idea what he's getting himself into, and he didn't.
I didn't either.
Know. He didn't know. He didn't know what he was walking into. Now, he couldn't have known that the name was going to change 6 months
after the
after
sexual scandal stuff.
He didn't know all of that stuff was coming. But working for Daniel Snyder is a chore. And the fact that there was no Vinny Serrato or Bruce Allen to shield Ron from that stuff, he was going to be the new Bruce Allen in certain terms, because Bruce was the one that dealt with a lot of that stuff, right? As the team president / GM. So Ron, in effect, this coach-centric approach that Dan Snyder had talked about during the Happy Thanksgiving press conference, essentially said, hey, Ron, you're the face of the franchise now. So everything, exactly, because Dan doesn't talk about anything, right? Yeah. He pushes somebody else out there, whether it's Doug, or it's Bruce. He pushes somebody else out there to do all the talking and eat all of the stuff that is coming to the franchise because of his doing. So Ron had no idea what he was walking into. And I could tell very early on, he realized this is not what I signed up for, but it was too late, right? He can go back. So at that point, he realized it's never going to be about football as long as he's here, right? As long as Dan is here, I'm never actually going to just be able to focus on football, because every month at a bare minimum, there's a new story. There's a new allegation. There's a new lawsuit. There's a new civil suit. There's some kind of something going on with Dan Snyder that is going to bring negative attention to this franchise. And then, the reporters have to ask about it. They can't just bury their head in the sand and act as if it doesn't exist. So, we're about to play the Chicago Bears last year on Thursday Night Football, and this ridiculous piece comes out from ESPN, with Don Van Netta and Seth Wickersham. And I mean, this is one of those hard-hitting, investigative journalism pieces, crushing Dan Snyder, talking about everything, all the dirty laundry. We got a game in 3 hours. This is coming out. Like, how are you supposed to focus, right? So I think for the first time, I've been talking about this all off season, I could see it. So one of my superpowers is that I'm able to really draw inferences. I'm able to read body language really well. It's part of the, psychology background that I have. And I said, very early on in the offseason, I said, Ron looks at peace. He was so comfortable and confident for a guy that's going into a make or break year. And this is not just make or break in terms of if he gets fired, he'll get a job. When you get fired from Washington, your career is over as a head coach. Okay. Mike Shanahan has never coached again in the league. Jay Gruden he had an offensive coordinator job for 1 year, but he hasn't coached again as a head coach in the league. You're not getting another job. You're not getting another opportunity. Jim Zorn hasn't been a head coach again. You're not coaching again. You get fired from Washington, that is it. So this is it for Ron if he can't win this year. And Ron has been so cool, calm, and collected. Yeah. You know why? Because he doesn't have to worry about Daniel Snyder anymore. So I think he's absolutely fine with having that title taken from him.
Playing with house money, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, for him, he's like, he already made this statement. And, I think it shows maturity from him. It shows a level of peace and tranquility with the situation, whatever happens. He said, my goal is to leave this situation in a much better position than where I found it, which he's already done. Okay. Correct. And my thing has been to the fan base, because there are a lot of fans that just can't stand Ron as a head coach. And I said, that's fine. But what you have to acknowledge is that Ron came in here, and the thing that he said from day one is he wanted to change the culture. Of course, he wants to win, but he wanted to change the culture. And if nothing else he's done, he's changed the culture here. He gave us a face that we could put out there that was respectable, because for so long, we weren't a respected organization. And he gave us a face that we could put out there that people respected, and it kept us from being drugged through the mud more than we probably would have been. Can you think of many coaches that could have dealt with the things that Ron dealt with over this?
Imagine if Jay was. Now, I like Jay. Don't get me wrong, and we can. And I think if you compare the three head coaches here, he stacks up with them. But could you imagine Jay Gruden through all of that? No, you're right.
Are you kidding me? Jay would not have been able to deal with all this stuff.
He'd have been smoking a lot of heaters in the office. Let's get to the product on the field, because I'm with you. I am curious before we move on from that. What do you think it takes for Ron to keep his job?
I think there has to be, at a bare minimum, playoffs, right? Bare minimum playoffs. I think in order to secure your job,
like 9-10 wins.
I don't know if it really matters how we get, as long as it's not like 8-1 and you get in on some backdoor types. If you win 9 games, you go 9-8 and you get in, and You know, it was a really like it can't be one of these. We start 3-6 and then win 6 out of our final 7 games type of deals, and you get in at 9-8. I don't think that's
why have you've watched as much football as anybody? Have you, and I ask this all the time, have you put your finger onto why Ron can't get off to a good start? It's not here. It's all the way back to Carolina that he starts out like 1-4, 2-5, and then catches on fire.
I don't know what it is. I'm pretty sure if he could put his finger on it, that he'd bring a stop to it. I think, and I've heard players talk about, you know, the lack of attention to detail early in the season and things of that nature. You know, even last year, when you go back and you look at last year, it was a play here, a play there. And honestly speaking, you know, you look at all 3 of his years and the slow starts. One year we could have been 0-6. The year we started 2-6, we could have been 0-8, right? You're an offsides penalty against the Giants and a fluky situation against the Falcons where you could easily be 0-8 to start the season off. But conversely, we could have beat the Titans last year in that game, right? And probably should have beaten the Titans in that game. And, you know, that Cowboys game was there for the taking, you know what I mean? And as far as, you know, some of the mistakes made, we forced 2 interceptions and both of them were negated by penalties, right? So there were opportunities in those first couple of games. I don't really know the answer to that. It's crazy because, like you said, this is a trend going all the way back to Carolina with him. And it's been proven that his teams, as the season progresses, they get better. For some reason in Carolina, they would finish the season hot. Here, we get hot in the middle of the season, and then we fade at the end. So if he can find a way to put it together for an entire season, and I think this is the year he can do it, it could definitely be a big change for Ron. But I think if you want to ensure that you're back without any questions, make the playoffs and win a playoff game. If you just make it to the playoffs, I think he's back.
You mentioned the possibility of that 0-8 start, which eventually led to Chase Young. We'll use that as a segue. Is he back? Do you like what you see? I mean, what should we expect out of Chase Young this year?
So I told myself he tricked me in 2021. So
can we just real quick? I don't want to cut you off, but you're right about this. 2021 is really interesting. He was like the de facto rookie of the year, right? There was like, go back and look, there was nobody else doing it. Right. And he beat up on every backup quarterback there was in the league. Now, I'm not trying to downplay Chase Young and his abilities, but I just wanted to kind of reset the framework for where you're going here because I think I know where you're going.
So his 2020 season, I had no issues with that. My thing has never been the competition that you dominate because whoever they put in front of you just dominate. If they put lesser competition in front of you, that's not your problem. Your job is to go out and dominate whoever they put in front of you. So, you know, look, he ate up, you know, the Teddy Bridgewaters and the Nick Mullins of the world and the Ben DiNucci's of the world. Yeah, look, I don't have any issues with that. You know, dominate whomever they put in front of you. But what got me was I got so excited in 2021. I remember him and Tez were talking about breaking the sack record for the most sacks from a tandem and things of that nature. And in the very first preseason game, we played the Patriots in 2021. And he uses a move I had never seen him use where he used his hands to swat down the hands of the tackle, you know, swim by him, get to Cam Newton, force the fumble. This is the first possession of the game. I'm thinking, oh my God, he is going to have 16.5 sacks this year, right? And then he had 1.5 sacks going into the Bucs game after the bye where he tears his, you know, knee up. And it was such a disappointing season for him. I'm not going to allow the excitement of, oh, he's back and he's moving around so well and he went and worked out with Larry Johnson, which is a good thing. He needs to get back to his fundamentals. And that's the guy that really helped build him into the beast that he was coming out of Ohio State. But I need to see it on the field. So is he back? I don't know. He's the wild card because to me, Montez Sweat is in front of him because there's been a level of consistency there for Tez. They picked up the 5th-year option, which means they felt a lot more comfortable with him. And part of that is the injury, right? He didn't play all of last year. They were frustrated. And I've told this story already. They were frustrated. Jack Del Rio is still frustrated. You know, he's got to get past his feelings, and he has. But they were frustrated with Chase last year because they thought he could have come back as soon as the Texans game, right? And there was always an excuse. He was so close to being ready for that Monday night game against the Eagles. He didn't play. They thought he'd be ready the following week. He didn't want to play on turf against the Texans. So they said, okay, don't play on turf. The following week against the Falcons, it was raining. It was wet at FedEx. He didn't want to play in that game. So the assumption was, oh, he'll be ready for the Giants game. Well, don't want to play on turf. And a lot of people lost their ACLs and tore their knees up on that Giants turf
That's right.
at the Meadowlands. So definitely not playing there. Okay, after the bye, Sunday night football, huge spot. Got to have it against the Giants. The winner of this game is going to make the playoffs more likely than not. And he doesn't play. And that was the game that really frustrated Ron. The temperature, the setting, everything was set. You had a whole bye week. There was no reason for him to not to play, and he didn't play. And that was the one that made Jack and Ron like really upset. And so I think there's a little bit of that lingering. Ron has moved on. Jack's still a little salty. Montez is more of Jack's guy. And so the consistency, that little period there, and the fact that they didn't pick up the fifth-year option, all of those things linger. But at the end of the day, it's all going to be based on production. If Tez goes out and has 8.5 sacks and Chase Young goes out and he has 13.5, that's the guy that they're probably going to re-sign, right? Now, if they're close, if it's even, if Tez has 12 and Chase has 11.5, I could see in a situation where they lock up Tez and they franchise tag Chase and say, do it again. And if he does it again, then maybe you're able to bring him back, because the thing about it is, and it becomes more realistic to bring both of them back if Sam Howell isn't the guy, which I'm rooting for Sam to be the guy, but if Howell isn't the guy and you have to then go and say draft a quarterback, you start that quarterback process all over again. So you're not spending big money on the quarterback position, if you get where I'm going with that. Whereas if Sam is the guy and he plays well this year, you're going to have to pay Sam next year, right? Because remember, Sam is in a first-round pick. There is no fifth-year option. This is year 2 of Sam. If he plays well this year and he plays well again next year, you got to pay him before he becomes a free agent after his 4th season. So you got to pay him going into that 4th season and extend him then. Sort of like the Eagles just had to do with Jalen Hurts because he wasn't a first-round pick.
That's right.
Yeah? So you can't spend that kind of money on the defensive ends if you got Sam's big deal coming in a year or two, right? Whereas if you restart that quarterback search and you go out and get another quarterback, now that guy's going to be on a rookie deal. More likely than not, he's going to be a first-round pick, and you're starting that whole process over. So now you can spend big on that D-line, because by the time you go to pay that quarterback, if he's good, Allen's deal would have come off the books by then. Terry's deal would have come off the books by then. You would have, redone some things there. Deron's deal probably off the books by then. So you would have a reset by then. But I think there's a realistic possibility that both of them are back next year, but they're both going to have big years for that to occur.
The story you told about last season, I think, is really important, because I think a lot of people look to the offseason stuff as to why the coaches were not happy with Chase and maybe some of the stuff he had done the year before. But it was that stuff last year that really got people upset. And I think the point you made is really is spot on. I think any which way, Tez will get a new deal here next year. There's no reason he shouldn't play well this year. And I think Chase Young will play good again this year and then get the franchise tag. And that way they probably can find, at that point, you probably are trying to find a way to move him. I've always said the only reason that makes sense that they didn't move him right now is that they kind of need him.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, they need to win football games, and trading him now for a 2nd-round pick or a 3rd and a conditional doesn't help you right now. It was the same thing with Deron last year, right? Like, we'll figure that out, but we need him to win right now.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great point you made.
Yeah, if you're Ron Rivera, a 2nd-round pick that you may not be here to spend doesn't help you. You know what I mean? That there's no value in that for you. You're not looking to help the next man. You're trying to help yourself. You're fighting for your job right now. So, you get to weeks, 11, and we're not any good. And I think the trade deadline is at the end of October. So you're somewhere in that week 8-9 range. You get to that point of the season and we're not playing good football. Maybe then you entertain trading him. Maybe Josh Harris steps in and say, hey, you guys need to trade Chase Young, right?
Correct.
But barring that, I can't see a scenario where it benefits you to trade him anytime soon.
No, and you're right, because if they can't get Sam Howell to work, then they're resetting the clock.
Mhm.
You mentioned a lot of guys that are big parts of this team that won't be around in a couple of years if indeed they have to hit the reset button.
Mhm.
Do you think they'll have to hit the reset button? Because I kind of think they've got something in Hell.
I do too.
Hell reminds me a little bit, I liked Jalen Hurts coming out,
Mhm.
and people weren't real high on him. Now, I'm not comparing the two of them,
Mhm.
although I think they have some similar traits.
Mhm.
But that was a guy that put his head down, grinded, and you can see where he's gotten to. Now,
Mhm.
part of that's the legs. I get that.
Mhm.
Sam's got a little bit of that. I don't think they want him doing a ton of that.
Mhm.
But I like the potential of Sam in this offense, particularly. I think EB, this system, this little West Coast dink and dunk offense,
Mhm.
I think will work great for him.
Mhm.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I was one of those that wasn't a huge fan of Jalen Hurts, but I knew why they drafted him. They drafted him to be an insurance policy behind Wentz because he always got
Right.
hurt. So I thought that was the perfect, place for him for that particular. I didn't expect him to blossom into what he's become. Speaking of Jalen Hurts, with
Yeah.
Sam, I've been a Sam Howell fan. I was shocked when he fell to the 5th round. To be honest with you, I thought he was
Yeah.
a second round quarterback.
I did
So
too.
for him to fall to the 5th round, for us to get our hands on him, he was. I mean, I think, and I've told people this: the similarities are striking when it comes to Jalen Hurts. If we're using that analogy and comparison, because Howell was drafted as an insurance policy to Wentz.
Yeah.
Hurts was drafted
True.
as an insurance policy to Wentz, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
Wentz
good.
flamed out there. He got an opportunity, and look where he is now. Wentz flamed out here. Sam's going to get an opportunity. I'm hoping to see him do the things that we've seen Jalen Hurts do. I think he's fully capable in this offense, as you mentioned with EB, where it's going to be really focusing on the short passing game. That West Coast scheme gets the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly. We saw that in the Week 18 game against Dallas, where in the short pass game, he was so accurate. It gave those receivers chances to do things that they hadn't had a chance to do all season long, which is catch the ball and run after the
That's right.
catch. So many of those plays in that game were explosive, not because they were air yards, that ball traveling 25, 30 yards in the air. There was the Terry pass, and he threw another one beautifully down the sideline to Jahan, and I thought it was a little bit of pass interference, and Jahan wasn't able to catch it. But most of those passes, two of them to Jahan in particular, these are short passes. Jahan catches, and there's run after catch opportunities because it's right out in front of him. He doesn't have to break stride. And you turn a 7-8 yard pass into a 28-yard gain. You know what I mean? That's a quarter of the football field. You know what I'm saying? So when you get those kind of plays, that's what they're excited about. Terry had a drop in that Cowboys game where he would have been running. It's a 3rd down. Terry's so excited. This ball's right in front of him. He's not used to that. You know what I'm saying? So I'm excited about those type of opportunities. To your point, he does have some wheels. I think people underrate Sam Howell's ability to run. He ran for over 1,000 yards his last year at UNC. Like, a lot of people don't understand, he's more athletic than you give him credit for. We saw a little bit of that in the Dallas game when he cut it back twice and scored on that read option keep. So there's going to be a lot of wrinkles that they can utilize with Sam Howell and his skill set. He's got a big arm. He can put the football anywhere, all 3 levels. I'm really excited about Sam. I've started a campaign around him, so I'm all in on Sam Howell. I expect him to be really good this season, and I expect him to turn heads. I really do.
Were you surprised that they didn't invest more in the offensive line, knowing that they were going to have a young quarterback? Keep wanting to call him a rookie quarterback. He's not, but
For all intents and purposes.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Very odd of Ron. It's interesting. Okay, so I've said this a couple times on the show. It's easy to say they spent no resources on the offensive line this year, and yet they went out and got a new right tackle who they are high on. Maybe I'm not as high on him at tackle, but they obviously are. And EB was there with him in Kansas City. So they spent the majority of their free agent resources on the right tackle. They like the left guard moving from tackle and Cosme. They upgraded, they say, at center with Nick Gates, who obviously they like. And they spent a 3rd and a 4th round pick on offensive linemen. So the question is 2 parts. Did they do enough? And 2, what kind of cojones does it take for Ron Rivera to draft 2 offensive linemen that, to your point from earlier, are not going to get on the field? He may never see those guys start for a Commanders game. I thought that was kind of interesting that he was willing to do it, because I think most people didn't think that either one of those guys were going to start right away.
And they're not. And or the likelihood is they won't. I can't say that they won't, but the
Barring
likelihood
injury.
is they won't. Right. But that speaks to Ron's level of confidence in this season that I've been telling you he's been pushing off. This, like, I'm telling you, there's an air of confidence. Like, Ron's like, I got an ace in my back pocket that you guys didn't know about, right? I think he's feeling like the combination of EB and Sam is going to be that ace that he's going to pull out of his back pocket, because no one's giving Sam a chance, right? They're dismissing him. I've seen articles that won't even recognize him as the starter. They're saying Jacoby Brissett's going to be the starter, right? So I think Ron is looking around and saying, hey, I got this ace in my back pocket. Like, Bieniemy's going to come in here and bring that Kansas City flavor here. And we got the weapons, which we do, right? And I think those who know, like the teams in the NFC East know, like, hey, we got Curtis, we got Terry, we got Jahan, like, we got weapons. We got Gibson. We got Robinson. Like, we have weapons. Like, the teams in the division know that. But I don't think the rest of the league really knows that we have, like, true weapons. EB knows, and he comes in here and he's like, yeah, I can do something with this. You know, if Sam and this offensive line, I think that's the biggest key, is the offensive line for me. Yeah. And to your point, has he done enough? So early on, I was a little annoyed that they were so aggressive going after offensive linemen, but it was for offensive linemen that I didn't think really moved the needle enough, if that makes any sense. Yeah. But then I realized you're in the midst of a ownership change. There's only so much that you can do, right? From a financial standpoint. And I didn't really think they were handcuffed initially, but then when I saw how they were kind of reacting later on in the process, and you know, we didn't sign Emmanuel Forbes literally until the day before training camp, right?
Correct. Right.
I started to realize they were hamstrung by the ownership change, and the assets kind of were frozen, so to speak. So I can't be too upset. They did what they could do with what they had and with the situation being what it was, but I myself have questions about this offensive line. Most people are not confident in this group. They have not been great in camp to this point, but I don't expect them to. You got 4 new offensive lineman starters this year, you know. So the only holdover is Charles Leno Jr. at left tackle. So everything is new. You've got a new voice, really, because Travell Wharton is taken over officially as the offensive line coach, but Juan Castillo, for all intents and purposes, is overseeing the tight ends and the offensive line. So you got so much going on there, and you got a new scheme. So it's not like these guys can just say, hey, it's the same thing we did last year. For Wiley, it is. You know, he knows the scheme, but none of the other guys do. So now you got to learn with the guy next to you and how he operates. So you got to build that continuity. And so it's a lot. And they're playing against Payne, Sweat, Allen, and Young, right? Every day at practice. Yes. So that's not going to make it easy on them either. But you're hoping that iron sharpens iron, and that those guys going up against them make them more battle tested, builds up a callus that when they get to the regular season and they start seeing some of these other teams, well, that's not the level of, you know, opponents we saw in practice. So we should be able to dominate. That's what you're hoping to get to. But everybody has questions. I'm included in that. I'm not sure about this line. Sadiq Charles is already injured. He missed practice today, you know, and so Chris Paul is in there with the first team. We don't know how he's going to perform. So a lot of questions, not a ton of answers right now. And you really won't get those until we get to preseason and actually see this unit against other teams.
The team didn't average over 19 points a game last year.
Yeah.
Let me say that again.
Yeah.
The team in an offensive league did not average 19 points a game last year. Yeah. If EB can get them to 22, 23, which I think is the league average, I imagine. And the other thing, to your point earlier, you know, I saw this maybe a week ago. Patrick Mahomes, it was either second or third lowest last year in yards that the ball traveled from his hands to the receiver were the running back's hands. So this idea that they were out there just pumping the ball down the field, no, they used the short game to open up that long passing game, and I think we're going to see a lot of that this year. The league is set up to score points. This team has been set up to keep teams from scoring points, Can you still win with the defensive minded operation the way that it's set up in Washington?
So, as you mentioned, the league is moving away from that. That every rule that has been constructed, it feels like over the last 5 to 7 years, has been aimed at scoring more points, not stopping the offense from scoring points. Um, at the end of the day, like going back to the initial part of that conversation with Mahomes, what teams started to do 3 years ago with Mahomes because they were so explosive with Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins and those guys? They were getting behind defenses and they were getting like you were like, look, we cannot allow the Chiefs to have these explosive plays because in the blink of an eye, boom, 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 they can score 21 points. And all of a sudden you came in with this mindset of we're going to run the football, we're going to try to possess the ball, keep it away from them. And now you're down 21. You got to throw the football. You got that thing goes out the window. So what teams started doing, 2 deep safeties, 30 yards away from the line of scrimmage, forcing everything underneath. And Mahomes, they struggled, if you recall, not last year, but the year before. We played them that year. They turned it over 3 times in the first half, right? They were struggling with that whole concept of teams playing those deep safeties and forcing Mahomes to be patient. Because when he first came in the league, he was airing it out. And so he had to learn how to be more patient, how to take what they were giving him underneath, throw it to the running back out of the backfield, throw it to the tight end sitting down 5 yards, in front of the ball. And he got more comfortable, and that's when the offense really started to take off the last couple of years. So to your point with Mahomes, he wasn't airing it out, and they didn't have Tyreek Hill anymore. So they had to be more strategic in how they were, getting the football down the field. But I think what you're going to see here is we're not the Chiefs. Teams don't fear our deep threat ability, right? So we're going to get some looks that that teams wouldn't dare play against the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes.
Sure.
We're going to get single high free safety. We're going to get some cover zero where they're going to come after Sam and see if he can handle the pressure. And it's up to us to be able to execute and see that and say, hey, Terry, run the 9 ball, and get it to him and make them pay. Jahan, take this guy deep and make them pay for coming after Sam or giving us that look that allows us to use, the field vertically and stretch it. But we've been set up, to your point, and a lot of this was because we didn't have a quarterback. And when you don't have a quarterback and your offense isn't as good, you got to find a way to get it done. And that way was play defense, cross your fingers and hope that the other team makes a few mistakes and hope it's enough. When you average 18.9 points a game, you're not going to win very. I'm shocked that we won 8 games last season, averaging 18.9 points a game. Yeah. I mean, that is insane, right? To think about it in those terms, with the way the NFL is set up, I'm mind boggling. I mean, I still struggle with the fact that in 2021, we won 2 games in a row, not 2 games that season, 2 games in a row, 17-15. That's not even a common score. So these are the things that we've been doing here in Washington the last couple of years, trying to find ways to piece together victories. And all you're hoping is EB comes in here and like you said, just get us to around league average, 22. If you get to, I feel like if you can get to 23 or 24 points a game with this defense, if they can play the way that they played last year, and we can't assume that, right? We've been tricked before, right?
Yeah.
But I feel more comfortable with them this year. I think they've done some things to really strengthen some of the weaknesses of this defense. I'm not always, sold on Jack and when he decides to blitz. I don't think he blitzes often enough, and I don't think he picks the right spots necessarily. But with that said, if we can get a semblance of what we got from them defensively, I can't imagine that they'll be the best third down defense again next year, right? Like this upcoming season. They were so good. And we caught some breaks. I went back and watched some of those games, and their drop passes, their, miscommunications on third downs that allowed us to get off the field. Whatever. I don't care. I'm not giving that stuff back. I'll take anything, any gifts you're giving, I'm taking them. But at the end of the day, I can't imagine us being that good on third downs again. So I'm hoping we can, create some turnovers, have some things happen in our favor. But in order for us to win, we're going to have to score points. That whole 18.9 points a game can't be the norm. We can't rely on the defense to hold teams to less than 17 points and expect to win. That's a losing formula in the NFL.
I will say about this, and I've, the defense was really good last year. And so even if you expect some regression, the one thing that I think is in their favor is that they were 28th in the league last year in turnovers.
Yeah.
Right. So even if, again, even if you get up there to like league average, even if some of that other stuff, the third down stuff, even if some of those defensive metrics come down a little bit from where they were so high last year, if you can get up to 15th, 14th, 13th in turnovers, which is why they spent their first 2 picks on turnover machines,
That's right.
then, again, that should balance out whether, some of the lucky stuff from last year that maybe made the defense so great. Another thing, while we're talking about numbers that I find interesting, we've been waiting for a Gibson breakout season. Last year on for the Chiefs, Jarrett McKinnon, second in receiving touchdowns with 9 last year. That's the number. So it feels like maybe this is finally the time that we see Gibson used the way that we kind of expected him to be used when they drafted him, like they used him in week 1 last year. Well, I know you were excited as I was at that Jacksonville game. It was like, yes, here we are, something inventive, something nice, something interesting. And then no, we never got that.
Exactly.
But I do think this is the year for Gibson in this EB offense. Should be a lot of work available.
I agree wholeheartedly. And the thing that also is really beneficial to the backs is EB's a former running back himself.
That's right.
So there's an extra emphasis put on making sure that he maximizes the skill set of the running backs in particular. So I do think that they're going to utilize Gibson in a multitude of ways. Don't sleep on Brian Robinson and his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield and be dynamic. Yes. I think
he was not healthy last year.
He was not. And I kept telling people this offseason because I was watching film for the incoming class of, college players and doing film study on all these players. And I'm watching Alabama games and I'm seeing Brian Robinson and I'm saying to myself, he's more dynamic than, I had to remind myself because he came back last year and he played well, right? He played well to the point where you could easily forget he got shot.
Right.
The day after the last preseason game, he got shot.
Right.
He came back in week 5, so it's easy to forget. You get to week 15, you're not thinking about Brian Robinson got shot, 4 months ago. You're thinking like, wow, man, this guy's playing well. He was averaging 9 yards a carry against the Giants, and they stopped giving him the ball, right? Like, so you're thinking to yourself, man, he played well, but there's not another gear. He's good for what he is, but I'm telling you, there's another gear. Like there's shiftiness. There's a little bit more explosion. He can catch it. There's things that you didn't see from him last year that you'll see this year because he's a different back because he's healthy. But to your point with Gibson, I think this is the year where we finally get what we thought we were getting when he got drafted out of Memphis, right? Remember when we first got him, we were like, oh my God, we don't have these type of players in Washington.
Right.
We don't have the gadget guys, the guys that are chess pieces that you can move around and you can do so many things with and create mismatches with. This was supposed to be that guy. And we saw a little bit of it in 2020. We saw a little bit of it in 2021, the 75-yard screen against Buffalo, right? The jet sweep in his rookie season against the Cowboys, the wide receiver screen in his rookie season against Baltimore. Like we saw flashes, right? Then the 2022 opener against Jacksonville, he runs a corner route, right? He has a touchdown catch against Green Bay in the back of the end zone. Like there were certain moments, but there weren't enough, right? I think this is the year where we see it for an entire season. There's not just a pocket of moments that we can pick out where he's dominant or he shows off that skill set. I think we're going to see it for a full 17-game stretch, and that's going to be refreshing to see.
Leave it to Washington, a la Clinton Portis, to bring in a guy like that, ask him to add 20 pounds and use him as a sledgehammer.
Right. Exactly. Guy, rushes for 1,500 yards his first 2 seasons, comes here, and Joe Gibbs turns him into a 3 yards and a cloud of dust back, right?
And they did the same thing with Gibson. I remember them asking about the fumbling issues. He said, well, I'm not used to running between the tackles where 320-pound guys are slapping at me. Usually I was like on the outside with a safety.
Right. That's right.
Speaking of safeties, Marcus Williams is kind of like one of the last guys to get paid. He's 10th on the list currently. I think he's 5 years, $70 million, something like that. I think you know where I'm going. Would you pay first of all, let me do this real quick.
Hmm.
I'd like to give Ron and Jack a little credit because when they got here, I led the antiquated charge where everything was not they weren't up on what was going on now. The game had passed them by. They're kind of the leaders in the clubhouse on this 6 DB look that a lot more teams are going to. So I think they deserve credit for that. They drafted real well that way with the DBs.
Yeah.
Curl's up for a new contract. That's why I brought up the Marcus Williams money. 5 years, 70. It's like right around 16 million a year or something like that. When they get to the negotiating table, I'm assuming that Washington will say, where are the turnovers?
That's right.
Because he's got none.
That's right.
And then his reps will say, well, where were your wins when my client didn't play?
That's right.
Because they didn't win games when he didn't play. Somewhere in the middle there is the importance of him. Is he more important to us than he is to the rest of the league? Is he one of those guys that we overvalue as fans? And then I guess ultimately the question gets to, would you be willing to pay him the 5 for 70 with 40 guaranteed or whatever it is?
So I'm showing my age here as a fan, but for us old enough to remember, this is a Ryan Clark situation, right? Sure, Ryan Clark was one of those linchpin pieces, similar to Antonio Pierce, right? You kind of just, if you were a fan of the team, the importance of this player, you really need to re-sign him. Instead, this was Dan Snyder at his peak, right? Nope, don't want to re-sign Antonio Pierce. Let's go get Jeremiah Trotter. Nope, don't want to re-sign Ryan Clark. Let's go get Adam Archuleta, right? So Ron and company have did a great job of retaining our stuff, homegrown product. That is, to me, the hallmark of the NFL is what you do is you tell guys in the locker room, if you do it the right way,
that's right,
we're going to take care of you here. You don't have to get paid anywhere else. You do it the right way. You do the things we ask you to do. And you do it at a high level. We're going to take care of you here. And we're going to set the example to the other guys in the locker room that if you do it the right way here, we're going to take care of you. And they've done that. They started with Jonathan, then it went to Terry, then it was Durant. And they've shown everyone that's the blueprint. And that's why Montez Sweat isn't tripping. Like, hey, I've seen the blueprint.
That's right.
If I go out and ball this year, they're going to break me off. I don't have to trip, right? And that's the same thing they sold to Chase. It's like, this is business. We didn't pick up the 5th-year option because the last 2 seasons, there hasn't been any production. You didn't play last year, and the year before that, you had a sack and a half. So it's all business. You go out and you ball, and we'll take care of you, So when I look at this team and the defense, and I look at Cam Curl, and we saw the impact last year. And that's why this season is going to be important, because he's not going to get his money before the start of the season.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get it. So the argument of we didn't win any games without him, that's an argument that you would have used this year if you were negotiating. Like, hey, I didn't see my client didn't play the first 2 games of the season. We were awful defensively in the first 2 games. He comes back in week 3. We weren't awful, but we weren't good enough, but we only gave up 24 points, right? And from that point on, he played. Then at the end of the season, he gets injured again. In that second Giants game, you lose 3 in a row without my client in the lineup. Meaningful games, right? So that would have been the exact point they would have used. And the counter to that for the club would have been, hey, man, you want to get paid like Justin Simmons. You want to get paid like Minkah Fitzpatrick. These are the safeties that have gotten deals lately. You want to get that kind of money? You got to show me the turnovers. Those guys are taking it away. Kevin Byers of the world, Marcus Williams, as you mentioned, those guys are taking it away. You want that kind of money? Take the football away. Cam Curl hasn't had a turnover since his rookie season. All right.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But they're also asking him to play up close to the box in the safety role and in the big nickel role, which doesn't necessarily align itself to turnovers.
It does.
We're talking about free safeties getting paid.
That's right. And so it's a little bit different. It's a dicey situation. The fan base, again, and this is one of my things that I talk about all the time. When you're a fan base of a team that doesn't have a lot, you hold on and you clutch tight to the things that you do have. Cam Curl is one of the very few guys on his team when we were really bad that we could say, hey, he's really good. We should keep him. And so the fan base has really taken a strong liking to him. The organization has to figure out what's a good number for them and what's a number that makes sense for Cam Curl, and they've got to come together and make it make sense. He can't reset the safety market. He's not that
No,
kind
but
of.
would you pay him the 16 million that puts him right around 10th?
I think when it's all said and done, I guess it all depends on the length of the contract. Um, 16 is probably
Like I said,
high.
Marcus Williams is the last to sign one of these mid-level, like Derwin
Yeah,
James time. But I mean, obviously, we're
yeah,
not talking about Derwin James.
yeah,
5 for 70, I think, is what he signed in Baltimore.
yeah. I think that I try not to get too hung up on money, but for the safety position, I think that's a lot of money. You got to be like and I hate to be that guy because Cam Curl serves a purpose. He is an impact player. You just don't see it in the
Important.
numbers, you
Yep.
know. And sometimes numbers can be misleading, and his impact is felt. And he's one of those guys that's done it the right way, who's played through injuries. One year I think he broke his hand, put a cast on it, and came back. Matter of fact, it was last year. He started the season off with his thumb, right? That's what forced him to miss the first 2 games. He put a cast on it and he came back. Like, you want to reward guys like that. And he's
Yeah.
been so good for us. You just got to find something that makes sense. If cap continues to go up, 16 million probably won't even be that much, in terms of the cap as it continues to go up.
Yeah.
You just got to make it make sense for the team. If it makes sense for what you're trying to do, make it happen. I think 16 is a lot though for a guy that's not producing turnovers, man.
I know it's tough.
Yeah.
And I tell and you talk to the fan base and they just don't want to hear it. You know what I mean?
No,
Because he's
they
a fan favorite. And I totally get that. I'm with you. Maybe he just loves it here and what they've got going on, and they can work out something. 13 makes me a little happier.
I don't think he
bunch of
turns
money up
down
front.
13 or 14 per,
I wouldn't think so.
with some incentives. Hey, if you get 3 or 4 interceptions in a season, that's another $1 million, right? Like,
well, in particular, like that Marcus Williams deal, I think had like 30 guaranteed at signing. Like you do something like that, it'd be hard. It'd be a little hard to turn that money down. I think.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Louie, let's wrap like this because I didn't even realize we've been at it for an hour. I could have done this another hour with you easily. What do you think the record will be like this year, and what makes a good season in your mind?
So I haven't given my prediction yet, so I won't give it here yet. But I'll just say this.
How about this? The Vegas has the line set at 6.5.
Yeah, I saw that. That's easy. I'm pounding over on that.
Over.
Yeah. Pound. I mean, last year I think they had it set at 7 or 7.5, and I was pounding the over on that. I mean, we barely hit it, but I knew we would win more than the 7. I think it was set at 7 or 7.5 that they had it at. 6.5 is it's criminally low. I get it. The schedule's a lot tougher than it was last year, but I think that's criminally low. And all of that is tied to Sam Howell. They don't believe in Sam Howell. Vegas doesn't believe in Sam Howell.
That's the only thing you can think, right?
Yeah, that's it. I'm telling you, that's what it is. The numbers, the lines are usually tied to the quarterback position.
Yeah.
You take Aaron Rodgers off the Jets. I don't know what their win, what their plus or minus total is for the season. I guarantee you, after they acquired Aaron Rodgers, it probably went from like 5 or 6 up to like 9, 8 or 9, right?
Yeah.
That's
he's good for at least 2 or 3 games.
Sure. That's the difference between an elite quarterback in this league.
Yeah.
So they view Sam Howell at the bottom of the totem pole. They treat him like a rookie quarterback, which, like you said, essentially he is. 1 start under his belt in the NFL. So that's why the number's so low. I believe in Sam, so I think that number is going to be exceeded. And then you asked me what's a successful season?
I did.
So a successful season for us, again, I did a poll recently that gave the viewers an option to choose from 5 different choices. And one of the options was the option that ended up having the highest percentage was win 10 or more games, and a playoff game, and Ron is retained as the head coach. Because a lot of people don't realize Ron still has a year left after this year on his contract. He signed a 5-year deal. So theoretically speaking, they could not do anything and he could just be a lame duck coach next year. I find that hard to believe that that's what they'll do, but it could happen. So that's the one that everybody chose for the most part. I thought, because so many people keep bringing up, I want Ron gone, but I want EB to stay. I want him to be the head coach. So that was another option. Like, you win 9 games, right? just missed the playoffs. Ron gets canned, but they see the improvement on offense. And Josh Harris is like, hey, Ron has to go, but EB, if you want to stay, you can be the head coach, right? So I thought that would be the one that kind of challenged that first option. And it wasn't. I was proud of everyone for pushing back against that option because I don't know if that's really realistic or not. But I don't really see that happening either. But
I don't either.
So another option, which ended up being the second option, was you missed the playoffs, all right, but Sam Howell plays really well. So in that instance, you're probably looking at a situation where the defense regressed and special teams, because that's something we don't talk about a lot. But Joey Sly missed a lot of extra points last year. It's why they brought in another field goal kicker, and Michael Badgley to compete with him in camp, because he missed a lot of extra points and he missed some field goals last year. But really, the extra points are costly. Like the Lions game is a great example. He misses an extra point. We're down 9. The game's over now. Like we don't even have a shot. You make the extra point. We're down 8. We can kick the ball off. We got 2 timeouts plus the 2-minute warning. There's a chance we can come back in the game. He killed that by missing the extra point. Now the game's over. So special teams and the defense could let us down, but Sam goes out, throws for 4,013 yards, 28 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and he establishes, I'm a franchise-type quarterback. You don't have to go looking next year. You only won 9 games. You missed the playoffs, but Sam established himself. Everybody's going to get, fired if you don't make the playoffs. So you clean house, but Sam establishes himself. I think that's the base for me, is you walk away from this season saying, hey, we got a quarterback.
Right.
We got a guy. We got a signal caller. To me, though, the most ideal situation is that you qualify for bonus football. So winning 10 games, because I think it's going to take 10. Winning 10 games, making it to the playoffs. And if you do that, Sam has established himself more likely than not anyway, right? So that's really what I'm aiming for, is win 10 games. The only way that I'll be a little disappointed if we won 10 games and made the playoffs is if Jacoby Brissett ended up coming in and winning 5 in a row, like on some Todd Collins type stuff. And you're like, man, that's not sustainable. So, yeah, for me, winning enough games to qualify for, bonus football and, establishing, hey, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with in this NFC East now. We got new ownership. We're feeling good. We got ourselves a quarterback. We got talent on this roster. Look out for the Washington Commanders. That's, to me, what an ideal season looks like.
Finding the quarterback would be so huge. And it's a show for another day, and I know you'll do one and we'll do one here, but looking at that schedule, not getting to 9 is dicey.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting road to get to 9 wins this year. I think it's going to be fascinating. But if they come out of here with a quarterback, that's it, man. That's the dream, right?
That's it. That's what you're looking for, man. You don't have a chance in this league if you don't have one of those guys. So we got to establish that first.
What does it look like over on your channel once the season gets started? What do you guys got going on over there?
Oh man, it's hectic, man. So
I know.
because I cover the entire NFL. So
yes.
It starts this Thursday. Yeah, Hall of Fame game. So not it's not about the Hall of Fame game. It's about what it represents. It means football is back, and you won't have another week for the remainder of the summer. Well, really the next 6 months without football, because even when there's no NFL game at the end of August, college football kicks off, and you get college football. So
you prefer college or NFL? Do you have a preference?
I'm an NFL guy through and through. I'll watch college football, and it'll be on, but it's not something that I literally carve out hours at a time to sit down and watch on a Saturday. If I got stuff to do on Saturday, I have no problems missing college football at all. Yeah. Whereas the NFL, I'm not doing anything on Sunday. My wife already knows. Sundays are off limits. I'm watching football.
Louie, you're the best, man. I always love doing these. It was been too long since the last one, so I'm glad we were able to work this out.
It's always a pleasure, Doug, man. I love being on the program and chopping it up with you, man. And anytime you need me, you know how to find me.
And again, congratulations, man. 11 years is bananas.
I appreciate that, man. It has been one hell of a journey, and I can't wait to see where it goes next.
Well, hoping you 11 more, my brother. 11 more.
Appreciate that.
All right, man.